Hey people. I had a very cool day today. I got to watch Annalise do gymnastics for the first time. That was something. She's been asking about gymnastics, and we took her to a gymnastics. I signed her up for a gymnastics class, and she loved it. She wants to go back tomorrow morning. She just went to sleep. Can't wait to go back. Very fun. That's one of these heart-elevating moments. So I've got that going on today. I actually came away yesterday. Anybody who watched my post from yesterday, I did a post right before I did another performance of the Cabaret. And what was interesting was that I did the post kind of as a pep talk, as a here I go, readying myself and in a way, tracking where I was and tracking where my thoughts were and kind of consciously engaging in a certain way as I stepped into the next performance. And what I was emphasizing, what I came back to again and again, and what I felt myself drawn to as I was preparing, was being in a place of reminding myself and encouraging myself and almost like invoking that I was doing the performance for other people as a service to other people. Allowing myself to be of service. And I even sort of was observing that the whole idea that we decide to be of service is sort of not really what's happening. It's kind of an illusion, because we are inherently of service. That's the nature of life. And so really, when we decide to be of service, what we're actually doing is surrendering to the way things are. And we're simply becoming conscious of the fact that that's the way things are, and surrendering, and in a way, of course, engaging in that service willingly. That service that we're already doing, that we're already performing, there is obviously something significant about doing that willingly. So anyway, this is kind of where I was yesterday before I went in. I was kind of bringing myself to this place of selflessness, attempting to anyway. And so, and there was something kind of buzzing in the back of my head as I was doing this, kind of like just like a little flashing red light going, is this right? Is this honest? Is this actually what's happening here? And I wouldn't have probably even noted it as significant, except for two things. One, I've had this sensation before that I'm about to describe to you. And two, when I checked in with a friend of mine afterwards, we sort of, in our conversation, we started to unpack some things that flagged this for me very, very concretely. And basically, what I found was all of that emphasis on selflessness and doing this as an act of service. It's almost like it was a little bit of a deflection or abdicating, just taking responsibility for who I am and what I am and what I am bringing. And I say that So the way that this came out was a friend of mine said, when you do the meditations, I had been talking about, what the experience of playing, improvising a meditation at the same time as I'm improvising the scoring of it on piano, and finding that kind of tricky, because I was like, it's one thing if one of those two things is very clear and I can kind of keep my attention on the other one, but because I was kind of making up both, I found myself getting a little bit caught, either going too far into one or the other, and then sort of having to like come up for air and remember that the other thing was also online, or just kind of feeling like tugged, like I wasn't sure where to put the emphasis. I wasn't sure which one to advance, and ultimately, I actually think it went pretty well. I felt like that meditation was really. It definitely was coming from somewhere. Like images were just coming to me from somewhere. So it's not like I felt like there was a major problem, but I registered that. And what my friend said at that time, when we had the conversation, she said, "What if you just did a meditation for yourself? Like play the piano, play the music, and let your own, like guide yourself through a meditation instead of guiding us through a meditation, right? Instead of guiding everyone else, instead of making it about everyone else, what if I just guided myself through the meditation that I needed and trusted that meditation, that journey that I went on, of course, bring everybody along for that, narrate that out loud, let that come through, but then trust that is also what everyone else needs." And what I found so interesting about this was it was almost like a light bulb going off in that moment. I was like, wow, that makes so much sense. Because instead of taking the reference point for what I'm doing and putting it out there somewhere, which makes it inherently hard to tell what I'm doing. It's like, and it's not that nothing came through or that nothing can come through in that way. It's just that it puts the locus of the focus out there somewhere, as opposed to right here in my core and going through my own visualization of of the journey that I'm requiring, that for whatever reason is coming up in me. And it's so funny because it's like that whole idea, and I've been talking about trust. I was talking about how we're already of service, so the act of deciding to be of service is actually just a surrender to what is. And yet, I had somehow still, in all of that, I was externalizing the emphasis in a way that actually felt like I was abdicating responsibility for it. I was actually saying, oh, this is about everybody else. It's not about me. It's not about me. It's about everybody else. It's about something out there, somewhere out there, And that's the thing that I think was niggling at me when I went into it. When I was doing the post yesterday, that if you saw it, then you know what I'm talking about. There was something niggling me about that, and I think it was this thing. I think it was that I was almost like artificially putting the reference point outside myself, as opposed to just saying, "This is what I'm doing. This is what I need. This is what I want." And not in an egoic way saying, this is all about me, right? I'm just going to do whatever I want because I want it and everybody else is better like it. That's a totally different position of self-centeredness. But the opposite of that is almost the same thing. It's expelling somehow outside of ourselves the responsibility for what we truly are, for what we truly do want and truly are bringing to the table. If everything I'm bringing to the cabaret is all about everybody else out there, well then how am I to claim it? How am I to own it? How am I to orient towards what is coming through me. If all ownership and all emphasis is outside myself. And it reminded me, when I was on a retreat with Thich Nhat Hanh many, many years ago, one of the first meditation retreats I ever went on, he said something about, he's talking about the ego and dissolving the ego, and basically the path of enlightenment being one where when you start the path of enlightenment, it basically comes down to this Eastern precept. There's basically, they say in Buddhism, they say there's only two mistakes you can make on the way to enlightenment. One is not to start the path, never to start walking the path. Number two is not to finish walking the path. And this was sort of in that context of he said his teacher at some point said to him, because when we go from ego to authentic self, there's a dissolution of the self that happens. There's a dissolving of the ego that happens. And so, but when the ego dissolves, there's also there's also another destination. It's not just that the ego goes away, and in fact, you can get quite a number of interesting psychological, clinical conditions from just dissolving an ego and not having any, and just disorienting the personality. Anyway, what Thich Nhat Hanh said was, his teacher told him, being stuck in the self is bad. Being stuck in the ego, being stuck in the self is bad. Being stuck in the non-self is worse. And that has stuck with me my whole life. I've just remembered how clearly he was saying this notion that we get when we start doing spiritual practice, that it's not about me, it's not about what I want, it's not about my needs, it's about being of service, being of service, being of service. There's something that is actually false. It's actually a kind of not honoring our own impulses enough, not trusting our own impulses enough to claim them and to say, assuming we've gotten past the point where it's like we're just being selfish for selfishness' sake. That obviously that's not enlightened. But once we recognize that we're of service, once we're already sort of in the journey on that path, there's a kind of, oh, I'm so selfless thing that we do that's actually a lack of taking ownership of ourselves and lack of taking full responsibility for what we bring, and just trusting that I can claim what I bring. I can bring what I have. I can trust what I have. That is enough. And that I don't have to make it all about everybody else. It's already all about everybody else. What I bring will already inherently resonate with the people who require it and whom it can help. I don't have to bend over backwards to make myself all about service to others. There's a kind of like preciousness that we can get into around that. That's just not authentic. And it's actually a sort of like deflection of our own, claiming our own ground, claiming our own self, showing up as we are, who we are, in comfortable in our own skin, and just being that. So that's loosely what happened between my post yesterday and then the experience of doing the cabaret, which also in some ways manifested some of these things I'm talking about and reflected to me some of these things I'm talking about. And then being able to reflect upon it afterwards and have a little time to think about it and notice and remember, oh, I was being niggled by this thought. I think I know why, kind of putting some pieces together. So anyway, that's today. And then to cap it all off, I got to watch my daughter do gymnastics, which was so much fun. Oh my God. Super fun. Thanks for watching, people. Love you so much. I can't say often enough how much this conversation means to me, how much it means that you show up and watch these and comment on these. So thank you. Mwah. Love you. I'll see you tomorrow.